All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to unpack a story that's part national pride, part economic policy, and, well, part multi-billion-dollar mistake. It's a story all about Nepal, and it kicks off with a sentence that almost everyone there knows by heart.
If you grew up in Nepal, you've heard this a million times, right? It's in the textbooks. It's what politicians say on the news. It's basically the foundation of the country's whole economic dream. The plan sounds simple enough. Take all this amazing water wealth, turn it into electricity, and boom, prosperity.
But here's the big question we're digging into today. What if that foundational belief isn't just a little bit off, but is actually a dangerously misleading myth? What if it has locked the country onto a development path that's just ridiculously expensive and, frankly, set up to fail?
Okay, so first things first, let's just tear this whole water-rich idea apart. Because, while the numbers might look great on paper, what's actually happening in Nepal's rivers tells a completely different story.
So here's the real kicker. Nepal's water isn't some steady, reliable tap you can just turn on and off. Nope. It's all about extremes. For 3 or 4 months during the monsoon, the rivers are out of control. The country is basically rich in floods. But then, for the other 8 months of the year, those exact same rivers just shrink. The country becomes rich in droughts.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures how absurd this whole national story is. An annual average is totally useless when you're swinging from one crazy extreme to the other. You can't run a factory or a modern economy on an average. You need power that's there consistently all year round. And this basic misunderstanding has led to some truly eye-watering costs.
Which brings us right to our next point, how this myth cashes out. See, when you build your whole energy plan on a shaky foundation, things get expensive, and in Nepal's case, they get astronomically expensive.
Now check this out. This breaks down the real cost of a huge national project, the Upper Tamakoshi. It was supposed to cost 35 billion rupees. Okay, it actually ended up costing 90 billion. But wait, it gets worse. The project was 5 years late. That's 5 years where it wasn't making any money selling electricity, which adds another 35 billion in lost revenue to the bill. So the true cost to the nation? A massive 125 billion rupees.
So you're probably asking, how on earth does a project's cost just triple like that? Well, a big part of the answer is this little thing called a variation order. Now, sometimes they're needed, but in Nepal's system, it's become this notorious loophole. A contractor can just claim there was some unexpected problem, get a variation order, and poof, the budget and the timeline get inflated. It's a system that almost seems designed for these huge cost overruns.
And just to give you some perspective, look at this. Ethiopia, another developing country, builds huge hydro projects for about $800 per kilowatt. In Nepal, it's consistently over $3,000 a kilowatt, and often way more. We are talking 4 to 5 times more expensive, so the takeaway here is crucial. Nepal isn't just building hydropower. It's building some of the most expensive hydropower on the planet.
But the argument has always been, don't worry. These expensive projects will pay for themselves because we'll export all this electricity to India and make hydrodollars. Well, our next section explains why this is just another dangerous myth.
This visual really says it all. India's power grid is an absolute behemoth. We're talking 500,000 megawatts. Now, even if Nepal somehow built out every single feasible hydropower project it has, the grand total is only 42,000 megawatts. In this picture, Nepal isn't some critical energy partner. It's a fly on an elephant's back. It has absolutely no leverage. India just doesn't need Nepal's power.
And that lack of leverage shows up right here in the price. Remember that seasonal problem? In the dry season, Nepal doesn't have enough power, so it has to buy it from India, paying around 12 rupees per unit. But in the wet season, when Nepal has extra power to sell, it gets only 5 rupees per unit from India. You're buying high and selling low. That's not a strategy to get rich. It's a trap.
So if building crazy expensive power plants just to sell cheap electricity is a total losing game, what's the alternative? Is there another move? Yes. And this is where the whole conversation shifts to a really fascinating and much smarter solution. It's about using that power at home for an industry that will pay way, way more for it.
The strategy is actually beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of spending $1 billion on transmission lines to export cheap power, you build a data center right next to the power plant. You completely cut out transmission costs, and you sell that power directly to a customer who desperately needs it. You see, data centers, the things that power the cloud, AI, everything, are incredibly thirsty for energy, and they will pay top dollar for it.
And listen, this isn't just some wild theory. Nepal's own neighbor, Bhutan, is already doing this. They're using their hydropower for Bitcoin mining, which is just a super energy-intensive kind of data processing, and they are making way more money than they ever would have just by exporting that same power. It works.
Okay, so let's get to the bottom line. What does this all add up to? What is the actual scale of this opportunity? The final numbers here are, and I'm not exaggerating, truly mind-blowing. The current national plan is to export 15,000 megawatts of power by 2035. If, instead, that same amount of power was used right there at home to run data centers, the potential revenue is $66 billion US. And that's not a one-time thing, that's every single year. To really wrap your head around just how insane that number is, think about this. Nepal's entire GDP, the value of everything the country produces right now, is about $49 billion. So this single strategic shift could bring in more money every year than the entire country's current economic output. It's completely transformative.
So what does this mean for a regular person? Well, with that much revenue flowing into the government's coffers, they could completely get rid of personal income tax. The country could fund all its public services from the wealth of its own resources, without ever needing to tax its citizens' paychecks again. It fundamentally changes everything.
And really, that's what it all comes down to. The country is standing at a crossroads. It can keep going down the same old path, chasing this myth of hydrodollars in a market where it has no power. Or it can make a pivot, embrace a modern strategy, and use its resources to generate incredible wealth right at home. The power is there. The only question is whether the vision is.